Feeling stuck? Yearning for more? You're in the right place. This is Midlife Moxie with Nicole Hate, where you're going to get a weekly dose of courage, clarity, and maybe a little bit of chaos as we navigate our best chapter yet, midlife. Welcome back to Midlife Moxie with Nicole Hate. We're continuing our journey of building boundaries that bite. So our previous episodes have covered the art of no or hell no, and we've identified how to manage an energy vampire. Today, we're going to tackle, and I'm going to talk about what might be the biggest obstacle to maintaining those beautiful boundaries that we've been building, and that's guilt. Guilt-free boundary setting. It's not mean, it's necessary. Before we dive in, let me be transparent and clear about something, because you're buried under decades of conditioning that taught you your worth comes from your willingness to disappear for everyone else's comfort. We build our own guilt prisons. For many women who are in midlife, boundaries have gotten blurred over the endless array of duties and roles that we play and we take on. We're mothers, daughters, partners, professionals, volunteers, friends, caregivers, and the list goes on and on. And with each of those roles comes expectations, both from others and from ourselves. Here's where guilt enters the picture like a prison guard. We know that in our bodies, we're overextending ourselves. Yet we fear repercussions of saying no. We think things like, who will do this if I don't? I know I can do this, right? Or even, I don't want to burden another person by making them find someone else to take on this role. Do any of these sound familiar? That voice in your head that is saying you're being selfish, mean, or even difficult when you set a boundary? That's guilt talking. And it's one of the most effective tools that the world uses to keep women, especially high-achieving women, from protecting their time, energy, and well-being. But here's what I need you to understand. Setting boundaries isn't mean. It's necessary. It's not selfish. It's self-preserving. And the guilt that you feel, it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that you're finally doing something right. Something that honors your needs after years of decades of putting everyone else first. Where does this guilt programming come from? Because it doesn't just appear from nowhere. For many of us Gen X women, we saw our mothers give endlessly of themselves. We had few role models who had solid boundaries in place without apology. You see, I was raised in a household of what today would be considered a trad household. My mom was a trad wife or a traditional wife. And that was part religion that played into it with her own upbringing in a religious household. where men and women had very defined roles that had no crossover. The message was clear: women give, sacrifice, accommodate. Men provide, decide, and lead. And even if you weren't raised in a traditional household, these messages have permeated our culture. Women's magazines, movies, TV shows, they all reinforce the idea that a good woman puts others first, that setting boundaries is somehow unfeminine or even cold. The version that they loved was the one who never said no. And then there's practical reality. When we do set boundaries, people often don't like it. They push back. They question. They might even get angry or withdraw. That external resistance feeds the internal guilt, creating a powerful cycle that can be hard to break. But break it we must, because the alternative is a life of depletion, resentment, and disconnection from our own needs and desires. And that serves no one, not even us, and definitely not the people that we care about. Let me share some personal experiences that I've had with guilt and boundary setting, because I want you to know that you're not alone in this struggle. I've talked about it before, but when my kids were younger, I was heavily involved in PTO. I took on a lot of roles, responsibilities, and I did genuinely enjoy much of it. But my life took a turn when I had a new job, my hours changed, and my capacity was dramatically decreased. Of course, I felt guilt. I felt shame when I had to step back from some of those roles. Even though I did enjoy volunteering, I knew my time would be more limited with the new work schedule that I had, and I could not fulfill those responsibilities in the same way anymore. Luckily, I did find people to take over those roles relatively quickly, but I still carried the guilt, the sense that I had somehow in some way failed, or I let people down by taking on commitments and then having to release them. And I experienced something similar in the workplace. There were multiple times where my workload became too full, and I needed to step back from certain duties to find balance and to not stress myself out from being all things to everyone. And of course, I had a few managers who didn't appreciate my speaking up, but knew that was merely because they would have to find someone else to take on these duties, which would require extra work on their part. The guilt was real. It was uncomfortable, but what I've learned over time is that guilt is just an emotion. It's information, not a command. Just because we feel guilty doesn't mean something we're doing is wrong. And just because setting a boundary might be an inconvenience to someone else doesn't mean that it's not necessary for our well-being. Here are some specific challenges of setting boundaries in different contexts of life. Guilt can manifest itself differently depending on the situation. So let's look at maybe some specific challenges that you might face in areas of your life. Workplace boundaries, being the professional guilt machine. In the workplace, there's often a fear of repercussion from management. Will I be passed over on a promotion? Will I be seen as not being a team player? Will this affect my performance review? Bosses can try to guilt us by appealing to our vanity and our desire to be helpful. They'll say things like, "But you're so good at this." Or, "I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm in a pinch." Don't fall for it. Your competence is not your cage. I found it better to get ahead of the problem before the problem gets ahead of you. If you wait until you're completely overwhelmed or burned out to set a boundary at work, you're more likely to do it in a way that feels abrupt or emotional. Instead, try to notice early when your workload is becoming unsustainable and address it proactively. You might say something like, "I've noticed I've taken on several additional projects recently. To maintain the quality of my work, I need to discuss priorities. Which of these tasks should take precedence and which can be delegated or postponed?" This approach is not only professional, it's solution oriented, and it still maintains a boundary around what you can reasonably accomplish. Here are a few workplace boundary scripts that you might find helpful. I'm at capacity with my current projects. If this is a priority, what should I move to the back burner? I'm not available for calls after, let's say, 7 p.m., but insert your own time here. To maintain work-life balance, I need a week to review this proposal thoroughly before giving you an answer. I won't be checking my email on vacation. So-and-so, name a person, will handle any urgent matters while I'm out of the office. Family boundaries. This is the blood guilt trip. Family boundaries can be even more difficult because they can create rifts that are hard to ignore. And it's also hard to set family boundaries because families tend to know us so well. They lay the guilt trip on thick, and sometimes really thick. They are the ones who know what buttons they can push, what boundaries they can cross that will push you to your limit. They know just what to say to break your spirit and let those boundaries fall by the wayside. Statements like, "But I've done this for you," or "I'm family. Would you say no to family?" Or, "We're blood. Come on." They may lay it on thick. And every time that you've doubted yourself, you were right. But they've convinced you otherwise. Again, this goes back to being firm in your own personal boundaries when you know you'll be extended beyond what you can reasonably manage. This might mean preparing scripts ahead of time for any common guilt trips that are a running thread. It might mean having a support person that you can text or call when you feel your resolve slowly weakening. It might mean limiting exposure to family members who consistently disrespect your boundaries. Here are some family boundary scripts that you might find useful. I understand you're disappointed, but my decision is final. I love you, but I'm not available right now to discuss this. I will be leaving the family gathering at 3 p.m. today as I had planned, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. I've thought about it, and the answer is no. I won't be changing my mind. And the blunt one, I can see you're upset, but guilting me isn't going to change my mind. Social boundaries, the friendship guilt complex. These are social boundaries. They could be with friends, acquaintances, community groups, volunteerism. And these can come with their own flavor of guilt, especially if you've been known to be the reliable one, or the always available one, or the one who never says no to a favor or an invitation. When you start setting boundaries in your social life, people might question what's changed, and they may take it personally. They might even distance themselves. And these can trigger guilt, leaving you asking questions of yourself. Am I being a bad friend? Am I being antisocial? Should I just push through my own discomfort to maintain these relationships? And while these are all valid questions, but they need to be balanced with equally important questions. Am I honoring my own needs? Am I creating space for relationships and activities that truly energize me? Am I modeling healthy boundaries for the people in my life? And here are some social boundary scripts that you may desire to use. That sounds lovely, but I'm not available that evening. I'd love to help, but I can't take that on right now. I'm taking a break from hosting events for a while. I appreciate the invitation, but I'm staying in this weekend. I'm not comfortable with that request. So let's talk about your body and its wisdom for a revolution in your life. How do we move from guilt-laden to guilt-free boundary setting? It starts with some fundamental mindset shifts, but more importantly, it starts with listening to your body. This has been a game changer for me, learning to listen to what my body is telling me. If I feel an immediate pit in my stomach or a dark feeling that is looming over me about taking on something or adding additional responsibilities or volunteering my time, it's an immediate no. This is a learned response over time, though. It is not immediate, and it takes practice to tune into these physical signals and trust them as wisdom rather than dismiss them as weakness or anxiety. Your body holds the truth. When it feels safe, it will show you exactly what it needs in attention. I also now know what I do and don't have energy for. I am guilty of enjoying volunteering and doing it all, but I also know that that's not healthy for me. So now I'm more discerning about what extra responsibilities I take on to keep my boundaries safe. This is preservation of my energy so I don't burn out. But this is also a deep internal awareness of my energetic boundaries. Your body will give you signals and it'll tell you. Think about times when you're in someone's energy and it feels draining versus energizing. When a commitment feels expansive versus contractive. When you say yes from a genuine desire versus an obligation. When you're operating from fullness versus depletion. And it is possible to reframe your boundaries as necessary for sustainable giving. If you're someone who values generosity and helping others, as most of us are, then boundaries aren't in conflict with those values. They're in service of them. Boundaries ensure that when you do give, you're giving from a place of fullness rather than depletion. You're giving by choice rather than obligation. You're giving in a way that's sustainable over the long term. Think about it this way. Would you rather have someone help you because they genuinely want to and have the capacity, or because they feel obligated and resentful? The quality of giving changes completely when it comes from an authentic choice rather than a guilt-driven compliance. When you set boundaries, you are modeling healthy behavior for other people. You are preserving your energy for what matters most. You are giving from genuine desire rather than obligation. This helps prevent burnout and resentment. You create space for others to step up and contribute. Self-compassion can be very much needed to be given when guilt arises. And it will arise because guilt is normal. It's a human emotion that we all experience. You can give into it and allow it to override your inner knowing and then pay the consequences later. Or you can acknowledge the guilt, thank it for trying to protect you from social disapproval, and then gently set it aside as you honor your deeper wisdom. Here's a practice for you when guilt shows up. Notice the guilt without judgment. You could say something to yourself like, I'm feeling guilty right now. Thank it for its intention. Thank you, guilt, for trying to keep me socially safe. Remind yourself of your deeper truth. I am setting this boundary from love and wisdom. And reconnect with your body, asking, what does my body know to be true? And reaffirm your boundary. I'm sticking with my decision. Let me give you some practical strategies for setting boundaries without the crushing weight of guilt. Prepare for boundary conversations. Don't wing it, especially for those boundaries that feel particularly challenging. Know what you want to say, how you want to say it, and what your non-negotiables are. Write out your boundary statement ahead of time. Practice it in the mirror or role play it with a friend. The more prepared you are, the less likely you are going to cave when someone pushes back. Use clear and direct language. I'm not able to take that on right now is a complete sentence. You don't need to justify it with your boundary, and an elaborate number of reasons or excuses. The more you explain, the more ammunition you give someone to argue with your boundary. Keep it simple, kind, and firm. Sentences like, I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me. I've decided not to take that on. I have other commitments, or I'm not comfortable with that. Expect and plan for pushback. People are used to using you have no boundaries, and they're likely going to test new ones. This doesn't mean that your boundary is wrong. It means that you're disrupting a pattern that was comfortable for them. Stay firm, repeat your boundary, and if necessary, remember that their reaction is not your responsibility to manage. Here are some common pushback responses and some ways you can handle them. A statement said to you, but you always do this. And your response could be, I understand. This is different. My answer is still no. A pushback of just this once, while you follow up with, I know it seems like just once, but my boundary stands. Or somebody saying, you're being selfish. And you can respond with, I understand you see it that way, but I'm still not available. And you may have someone who gives you the silent treatment or who withdraws from interacting with you entirely. Let them have their feelings. You don't need to chase them or even try to fix the feelings. Start small to build confidence. You don't have to set Mount Everest boundaries right now, right out of the gate. Start with smaller, lower stakes boundaries to build your confidence and tolerance for guilt. Maybe you start by saying no to one small request this week, or leaving a social gathering 30 minutes earlier than usual. Not responding to work emails, let's say after 8 p.m., or asking for help with one task that you usually do alone. Create boundary rituals that can help you maintain your boundaries and also allow you to process any guilt that arises. This may include a morning practice where you check in with your energy and your capacity for the day. An evening practice where you reflect on your boundary wins and write them down in a journal. Or even having a weekly review of all of your commitments and your energy levels. You may want to journal about guilt when it comes up, or doing breathing or movement practices to reconnect your body with wisdom. So let's get specific about different types of boundaries that you may need to set, because boundaries are not a one size fits all. You may have time boundaries about how and when you spend your time or when you're available. Not allowing calls after a certain hour or needing a certain period of time to respond to an email or a text within a certain time frame, and allow that person to know what your time frame will be. Setting a day of the week aside, Sunday being a family day where you're not going to schedule other commitments. You have energy boundaries that protect not only your emotional, but your physical energy. not taking on any additional volunteer roles, not being able to discuss work problems during your lunch break, or limiting certain conversations to 15 or 30 minutes a day. There are also physical boundaries. This is about your space and your body. This might be something like not even being comfortable with hugging someone, preferring maybe just to wave a hello, maybe a handshake, asking people to knock before they enter your office, or telling people that you need your own space when you're working from home. Emotional boundaries will protect your emotional well-being and your mental space. Things like not discussing your personal life at work, or telling a friend that you can't be a therapist in the relationship between the two of you, or telling family members that you don't want to hear them complain about other family members. We also have digital boundaries, and these are becoming increasingly important in the world of being connected all hours of the day through the little computers that we have in our hands and our pockets. Setting boundaries on when you check email and respond to email. When and how long are you going to be on social media on a daily basis? Or having certain times during the day that you respond to texts. Here is a little dose of some hard truth that you've probably already experienced, but it is worth me saying because not everyone will respect your boundaries. Some people will push back harder when you start setting limits. Some might even distance themselves from you. I look at this as not being a bug in the boundary setting system, but a feature. People who can't respect your boundaries really are showing you who they are. Believe them. And when people don't respect your boundaries, you clearly just can restate your boundary again. I've already said no, and that hasn't changed. You don't need to justify or defend it or even explain it. This is not up for negotiation. And you may need to implement consequences. If someone is consistently violating your boundaries, does that mean you limit your contact with them or maybe even end the relationship? Only you can make the call on that. You may need support. You may need a therapist or a really good friend or a coach to help you work through the challenges that you're facing. Always remind yourself of the why. Why did you set the boundary? This why reminder is important for your own well-being. Somebody is not going to like the new version of you that have these boundaries in place. And that's okay. Setting boundaries is one thing, but maintaining them is another. Do regular boundary check-ins with yourself. Schedule regular times to assess your boundaries. Are they working? Do they need an adjustment? Are there any areas where you might need new boundaries in place? How are you feeling about maintaining them? Pay attention to the energy levels and adjust your boundaries accordingly. There are days where you're going to be in a high energy state and you might be able to take on more. But there are also days where you're going to be in a low energy state and you might need tighter boundaries. So honor your natural rhythms and its cycles. It's important to have people that surround you, who respect and support the boundaries that you've set up. This includes friends who might celebrate your boundary wins, or family members who model healthy boundaries themselves. Again, a therapist offering you professional support if it gets that deep, or even online communities of like-minded women. Boundary setting is a skill that takes time to develop. You will make mistakes. You will fall back into old habits. It's normal. Adjusting your boundaries may also be needed, and that's fine. And if you cave, you're human. Allow to give yourself some grace. Remember, we're looking for progress, not perfection. Celebrate your boundary wins, no matter how small. This could be with you, or it could be with friends who are in your corner supporting you. Did you say no to an extra project at work? Did you leave a friend or social gathering or a family gathering early, maybe when you said you were going to stay late? Did you decline an invitation to something that you really didn't want to attend? These are small victories worth acknowledging. Be patient with yourself. Moving from guilt-laden to guilt-free boundary setting is a process. It's not an event. You will have setbacks, and yes, you will cave to guilt. There may even be boundaries that you wish you would have set differently. These are all part of the learning curve. The important thing is that you keep practicing, refining, and honoring your own needs alongside the needs of others. So this week, I challenge you to set one boundary in an area where you typically feel guilt. Choose work, family, social circle, wherever you notice that familiar guilt arising when you consider protecting your time or energy. Set the boundary, notice the guilt without acting on it, and journal about the experience. What did you learn? What surprised you? What might you do differently next time? Remember, guilt is normal. It's a human emotion that you will experience. We all do. But you can practice allowing your body to lead the way in keeping safe, grounded, and intentional boundaries. You can be in tune with listening to your body's responses. What feels good? What feels off? Or what feels wrong? Setting boundaries isn't mean, it's necessary. It's not selfish, it's self-preserving. And the more you practice, the more natural and guilt-free it becomes. That's our time today on Midlife Moxie with Nicole Hate. Thank you for joining me in this important conversation about guilt-free boundary setting. I want you to know that you're not alone, but you don't always need to be the glue. Sometimes you can be the gasoline, and you can set everything on fire and start anew. Until next time, may your boundaries be clear, may your guilt be manageable, and may your moxie be unstoppable. Before you go, I want to make sure that you know how to stay connected to this work, because what we have talked about today, this is just the beginning. If you're sitting there thinking, holy shit, she just described my entire life, and you want to know exactly what patterns are running the show in your life, I've created something specifically for you. You can head on over to my website, www.nicolehate.com, and take the assessment, which sacred pattern is running your midlife. It's a free diagnostic tool that will tell you exactly where you are in your own conditioning and what your next steps should be. There's no fluff, no generic advice, just precise information about your specific patterns. Because here's the thing, you can't interrupt what you can't see. And most women are trying to change their lives without understanding the deeper nervous system conditioning that is actually driving their choices. If you want to dive deeper into these conversations and connect with other women who are also done performing their way through life, you can join my private Facebook group. Link will be in the show notes. And it's where we have conversations, real, raw, unfiltered truth about women in midlife. And if you want to be on my VIP list for weekly doses of truth that maybe help keep you accountable to your own transformation, there is a link in the show notes, but there's also a link at my website, www.nicolehate.com, where you can sign up to be on my email list. This isn't a typical newsletter filled with tips and inspiration, though I do include that from time to time. This is a newsletter where I share hard truths, insights, raw, unfiltered things that are just not socially acceptable on social media. And these awarenesses that you can take away from what I share can be a catalyst for change. So I invite you to sign up. And if you're ready to go even deeper, because you might be tired of all of this surface level work and you really want a whole system level transformation, everything you need to know about working with me is on my website, www.nicolehate.com. I'm not a coach, and this isn't coaching, and it's not therapy, and it's sure as hell not spiritual bypassing. This is a resurrection of the nervous system. And this is for the woman who is ready to stop performing and start living. You can also follow me on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at I am Nicole Hate, where I share reminders about conditioning and women and midlife, confronting truths and desires that are just frankly not up for negotiation. So next week we will continue to have discussions that likely will make some of you squirm. It is what I'm best at. But if this episode shifted something for you, do me a favor and leave a review. Not because I need an ego boost, but because there are women out there who are Googling, why do I feel invisible in my own life at 2 a.m.? And your review might be what helps them find this podcast. Your review could also be the breadcrumb that leads another woman out of performance prison and into her own resurrection. So until next week, remember, you don't need permission to want what you want. You never did. That was just conditioning dressed up as consideration. You're a woman in midlife. You don't need permission. You just need to have desires and wants and the ability to be able to go after all of them. So stop asking and start claiming.